Hello and welcome to episode 57 of the Jake Williams Show. I, of course, am your host, Jake Williams, and today is a monumental day. I've been wanting to talk about this show since maybe the third episode came out on HBO. So if you've seen the title, yes, this is a full review of Watchmen Season 1 on HBO. If you have not seen it, do not listen to this podcast. Pause it, go watch all 9 episodes, and then come back and listen to this, because I'm not going to spoil every aspect of the show, but I'm definitely going to be talking about the finale and things leading up to the finale. So if you have not seen it, you're not going to want to listen to this. That being said, spoiler-free thoughts before I go really into it. I was thoroughly impressed with how this series panned out. I had my reservations about this because if you listen back in March on the 10th anniversary of Zack Snyder's Watchmen, I had stated, the title of the episode is In Defense of Watchmen. And I still stand by that. I enjoyed that movie for what it was. I mean, I still have the director's cut on my shelf. I mean, I still enjoyed that movie, but I think what Damien Lindelof has done with this series is completely changed my perspective on everything. Again, I still like Zack Snyder's adaptation, but man, the way that this show was done is it really feels like Lindelof was completely channeling Alan Moore. Like it felt like something Alan Moore would make. It really did feel like it was something truly adapted from that work. And how they did that with even including the squid, which even who's someone who loves the graphic novel, who's read it multiple times, I definitely don't. I'm not on huge with the squid. I don't really like that ending as much. I actually like Snyder's ending with the bombs, but if they want to stay true to the squid, I'm not going to dock the show for it. That they're trying to tell a continuation of this story. I loved all the new characters. I love the subtle references and Easter eggs to the work prior. It was really funny watching it with Ashley because she's someone who watched Snyder's movie, but she never read the comic books and it never really got into the Watchmen world as much as I did. And so watching it with her was interesting because there were little things that she wouldn't pick up on and quite get or understand that I would get right away, like the Easter eggs or little nods to the original that I would get because I'm a nerd with Watchmen. And it is truly rewarding for fans of the book. And if you really love the book, you're going to love the series, I think. Now, I could be wrong. I'm not going to speak for everybody. But I definitely feel like that's something to be happy about. And even if you don't like it like Ashley does, I don't... excuse me. Even if you're someone that hasn't read the book or super ingrained with the lore of Watchmen, I still think you can enjoy it. Because Ashley was someone who just seen Snyder's movie, never really read the comics, and she still had a good time with it and still enjoyed it because it's such a good, cohesive, well-written story. I absolutely adore it. So that's why I'm telling you now, in front of all the spoiler stuff, it is worth your time to sit down and watch. Go watch it and then come back to this because I want to just get into the nitty-gritty. Now, I'm not going to go into every episode, as I said, because that could probably be a 3-hour podcast and me blabbering about a TV show, and I don't think that would be good for everybody or anybody really. So here we go. Spoilers are activated. 3, 2, 1. Let's get into it. Watchmen Season 1 review, if you want to call it that. I want to talk about mostly the big highlights of the season before I die. The finale is its separate topic, and the future of the show and what HBO can do with it, that's another topic. But let's just talk about the highlights of all of the season. The opening scene from the jump of this show kind of pulls you in and says, well, this is what this show is going to be. And it's not going to pull punches. It's going to be uncomfortable. And you got to make a decision right then and there if you're going to be on board with it. And it isn't the level of... It's with the original Watchmen, Alan Moore's Watchmen, let's just say the first Watchmen, for argument's sake, I guess. I don't know. That opens with a violent murder, and it's the violent murder of the comedian. And you have something extremely violent in the show to start. So, I mean, Lindelof out of the gate gives us little parallels to the original. I think the difference with this compared to Moore's work is this is a lot more visceral, and it's not just because it's in a different medium. It's I think it's more visceral because it's centered around something that really happened, and something that is ugly, and something that is a black eye on our history, and that's kind of sorry, man, something in my throat. Okay, we're back. Sorry, I had to get a glass of water because I had to clear my throat, and I don't want to keep clearing my throat during this episode in between. I hate it. I don't personally like it, so I don't want to put it on you. All right, so we got a glass of water. But yes, the opening scene of this episode really shows the big black eye on our history, because it starts with the Tulsa race riots. And this is what I've always really adored about Watchmen, and what Alan Moore did and what Lindelof does here in the show. With it is tied to our history. It is tied to American history. It is tied to world history, but it's tied in a way that is alternative history. And I really love when stories can do a fictional alternate history to the things that happen in our lives, because it adds more to the story. It actually pulls you in closer, I feel like, and it adds more depth, and it gives you something that's identifiable, and it puts it in a way that it's grounded, but it also, of course, is like, well, we also have a man with his blue dong just flopping around and can do pretty much anything he wants. A literal god is amongst us with Dr. Manhattan and stuff like that. So yes, there's the absurdity of it, but it also grounds it in a world of like, what would it be like if we had a world where Dr. Manhattan exists, or where we had a world where there were vigilantes running around, and what it would really be like. And that's really what happens with the first story. Now the show addresses that, but does it in a different way. And I really thought it was great to come out with that. And honestly, if people were upset by this show, and there were, of course there were, because it's 2019 and everybody's upset about everything. I mean, for Pete's sake, I was someone who was complaining about the Ghostbusters trailer last week. But if anybody's upset about the opening of this and the thesis of this being racially charged and it hurts Watchmen, and Watchmen was never that, I don't think they read the first book. Still couldn't clear my throat. Sorry about that. I don't think they understood what that was about or what this could be, because all of this has always been politically charged, whether it be racially charged, whether it be nuclear war and foreign affairs and all these different things. So to be upset about something that really happened, and to be upset about a history that is real, I mean, look, I'm a white guy, and I can't understand the plight and the suffering that has been put on African Americans from that perspective. I can't. But I think what this show really does is give a good vision of what it was like to live throughout history of being black in America. And I think that's a good example of it. And to deny any sort of history where we have treated people of color that way is silly. To act like there isn't a world, and I get that people are like, I can see the aspect where people are upset, where it's like, look, we understand the horrible nature of our history. Can we move on? I'm like, I don't think we do, because we still have horrible things happening to people of color, too much to count and too much to have. I'm not saying that, I'm not the guy, I don't buy into the whole idea that all cops are racist or all this stuff and all this other things. And I'm not going to get too politically into that stuff, even though the show handles topics like that. But I'm also someone that says you can't ignore the signs that there are things that there are cops that have done horrible things to black people and still do, and there's still bad cops out there. I'm not saying all cops are bad. I'm not saying all cops are racists, but there are those kind of people in the system. So it still exists, and it's something that is just a part of us. And as bad as it is, and as much as it sucks, we have to find a way to address it, and we have to find a way to deal with changing it. Not deal with it, I'm sorry, that's not the words. We have to find a way to change it. Not deal with it, change it. And I think that's kind of the theme of this season of Watchmen. So I'm not at all mad about the choices to go with a route that has to deal with our history like that, because I think it's worth talking about, and it's something that we need to be honest with ourselves and understand that history can repeat itself. And history, and I'm not saying, I'm just saying, look at the, I'm not saying all people that voted for Trump are racists or anything like that. I'm not going down that route. But I am saying it is an increasing number of people that are white supremacists or white nationalists, and they are emboldened now more than ever. And this show deals with it in a way that I like. And it deals with the way that they co-opted like the Rorschach mask and took something that universally something that maybe questionable methods Rorschach had, but it's trying to be a symbol of good. And of course, when you think of the characters of Watchmen, of course, they get the guy that is probably the biggest psychopath of all the superheroes in Rorschach. I have been rereading Watchmen. This will be my third or fourth time reading through the book. And yeah, you tend to forget, I always thought that Rorschach was my favorite character, but the more I watching the show and then, going back and reading it, you shouldn't like Watchmen. You shouldn't root for not Watchmen. You shouldn't like Rorschach or root for Rorschach and Watchmen, because he is a grade A sociopath. And well, I might even say psychopath, because I don't think he understands his emotions. But he's not someone you should really want to root for, if you're being honest. Which I think he's a great surrogate for Batman. So another thing that I really liked, I liked that the police are vigilantes in Tulsa. Now, originally when I heard this idea, I heard because I was reading some stuff about the show and kind of just getting what to expect, because I didn't know really what to expect until I saw the trailer of the show, where I was like, is this going to be an adaptation of the original? Is this going to be a sequel? Is it going to be a prequel? I don't know what it's going to be. If it were a prequel, I would have torn my hair out. Now, I don't mind what Lindelof, and we'll get to this in a bit, but I don't mind what Lindelof did in terms of going back and kind of rewriting some history and changing some things of characters that, weren't really a huge central part to the story for Alan Moore, or we just got more. And I don't necessarily mind that as much, but if it were a whole entire series of them going back and doing prequels and kind of retelling the stories of these characters, then I would have been annoyed and I probably wouldn't have liked it. So the fact that it's a sequel and we're going, with now current times, I'm okay with that. I'll be right up front with you. I did not like before Watchmen, the comic books that came out. Didn't like the Watchmen prequels, just because I was like, I don't really like. It's hard for me to get on board for any prequels, whether it be movies, whether it be comic books, whether it be video games. I just can't get into prequels because there's no stakes. But anyway. Police being the vigilantes, so I'd heard about this before I really knew anything else other than the show, and I was like, I don't know about this. Mostly because that's just not what I'm used to. That's just not what, when you think of the vigilante thing, you don't think of cops. You think of, the guys that, especially in Watchmen, maybe a bad thing that the sociopath puts on a mask, but You don't think of cops. You try to think it's the antithesis of that. It's not supposed to be an authority figure and someone that can arrest people. It's supposed to be someone that's going to beat people up and hand it over to the cops. That's always been since the 30s or 40s when Batman and Superman comics came out. it's always been that perspective. So to have it as cops, I didn't know how I felt originally, but I do like that it was a little bit different. And then actually watching the show and getting the perspective of what it was and why they did it that way, it works and it all makes sense. If you're somebody that's watching, by the way, if you're someone watching through the show right now and you haven't got finished yet, trust me, it will all make sense. Because there are definite times throughout this season where I was questioning what the hell was going on, and I was wondering, how is this going to work? And then sure enough, the show found a way to make it work. Are there still questions lingering about the show? Obviously, because it needs to hook you to say, hey, this is it. This is all it is. Season 1 told a pretty cohesive story. This is kind of the ending. But if we were to make a sequel, we're going to leave this open a little bit in case HBO wants another season. But trust me, it will all make sense. So that was the first instance where I realized, okay, this thing's Lindelof will figure it out. And even with the Vite stuff, trust me. We'll get to Vite in a minute. But I love that they were the vigilantes because of the whole White Knight and the White Knight scenario where cops got doxxed and the 7th Cavalry found out where they lived and broke into their homes and murdered a bunch of them. And that forced the surviving members of the police, which I think were just 2 people. I think it was just Regina King and Don Johnson. And so they were deciding, all right, if we want to be effective police, we cannot show our identity. We cannot let this happen again. We have to be superheroes. We have to be vigilantes. So I thought that was really cool and an interesting aspect to the story. Moving on down the list of my highlights, I got to say all the performances in this show were phenomenal. I think it was, I would say top to bottom, I think it was perfect casting. I think everybody crushes it and everybody knocks it out of the park. I was a little shocked, and this is a big spoiler for episode 1 if you haven't watched it. I was a little shocked they killed Don Johnson in the first episode. But as I watched it, I realized something, and I was like, this has to happen. So it is, Lindelof did a great job, and this is the reason that right at the top, I said Lindelof has done an amazing job of fully realizing Alan Moore's vision in the graphic novel and being able to tell a sequel for TV. Now, Alan Moore is going to discredit it and hate it because Alan Moore hates all of his adaptations, but I think Lindelof really channeled Moore in this, and of course, he has to start the first season the way that the graphic novel started. There is a death that is the MacGuffin of the story. It pushes everybody forward. So, of course, it has to be Don Johnson, who we established in the first episode is this fatherly figure to Regina King's character, Angela Abar. He is a light at the end of the tunnel after what happened with what they called the White Knight, where all the police were killed. He was a way to guide her forward and to be her help, pushing her the right way, because she adopts kids of fallen officers, and he's kind of like a fatherly figure to her. So, of course, him dying is going to really set in motion everything for this show, and I really like that a lot. And it kind of sets everything forward, and it does what the original did. We have to have a character die to set up all these branching storylines. And what you think will be like a simple murder conspiracy, it never is. There's always more, and it's a lot more convoluted. But it all finds a way to make sense. The performances, as I said, amazing. I think Regina King is 100%. This is her vehicle. This is her chance to shine, and she crushes it. She does an amazing job in this story. Angela's character really is us, the audience, because she is taking this all in at a pace that we all are, where we're all just, it's hitting us and it's coming at us, and there's so much weight to it. And she handles it with just an amazing performance. This season gives her so much to do and so much range that she really just crushes it. I mean, there's the stuff with her and Cal where she is having a glimpse of the home life and being with someone she loves, but then there's also the Sister Knight alter ego that she has, where she is a total badass and she's just going to town on these 7th Cavalry racists, and she has so much to her, and it really does change, where she does have that attitude of Sister Knight when she doesn't wear the mask, but she is much more of a functioning member of society. But when she becomes Sister Knight, she is an ass kicker, and I love it. I love it so much. And what she was able to do in this season and what she was given was amazing. I mean, I felt every emotion I could possibly have felt when she was on screen. I really identified with what she was going with, and she does a great job of playing the audience member of like, what is happening? What is all this stuff? Holy crap, how do I manage to deal with all this? And it works so effectively, and it cannot be understated, the performance that Regina King put forward. It was amazing, and I can't say enough about it. Jean Smart, who plays Silk Spectre in the future, she plays Laurie Blake, and it was an interesting choice, I think, with her character, the fact that Silk Spectre works for the FBI and she's like a vigilante hunter. Because even though it's illegal in Tulsa for cops to wear masks, the Keene Act is still out there, and it's still illegal to be a vigilante. So she was hired as like someone who was a vigilante. She is hired on to be like their expert in tracking these people down and kind of being their... It's almost like, if you ever watch Mindhunter, it's like when they talk to serial killers and they... Trust me, this comparison makes sense. It's like when they talk to serial killers so they can figure out the patterns of the serial killers and how to, stop these people and catch them. Similar idea with bringing in Silk Spectre, where she's like the top person of like, I used to run with these people. I know what it's like, so I can help you. She was great. I think her character was really funny. It added levity to a lot of the silliness that was going on. I always think that I thought Laurie had that a little bit in the original, but I think because of all these years of... I mean, she says it in the first book. She's like, all my friends are superheroes. So she doesn't have that... And, I mean, for Christ's sake, her dad is the comedian in the original. She even takes his last name in this story, in the show. And to have the story of the original, where if you're not familiar with the book, which I would hope you would be if you're this far in, but I mean, the comedian almost rapes her mom, and then years later they do hook up, and Laurie is born. And it's something that is one of the biggest reveals in the book, and it's one of the most shocking, I think, reveals in the book. And to see how she's adjusted since then, where she's more of her father than she cares to admit, where she's mocking these people and she's making light of it, and it actually is nice to have just a little bit of brevity from all the silliness and over seriousness going on. Now, don't get me wrong, I like how serious this material is. I'm just saying that it is nice to have a character that does something different. Then I gotta give it up to Yahya Abdul Mateen II, which I hope I got that right. I've looked it up how to pronounce his name, so I was making sure I got it. Now this is a big spoiler, but his performance as Dr. Manhattan is brilliant. I think he nails the tone, which you think wouldn't be that hard, but he nails the monotone delivery of his voice, and he also does a great job of showing what... It's hard to say. Dr. Manhattan, if you've read the book, and if you've watched this, or if you've read the book, you kind of have this idea. But Manhattan, his delivery, and again, you don't really get that from the book. You kind of get that from Snyder's movie. It's very monotone. It's very almost robotic, because you have to think this man is not a man anymore. He's been a god for over 30 years at this point. He's been so powerful and so godlike that he it's hard for him to understand humans at this point. And they tease that in the book, and they definitely go with it here. He has a legitimate problem communicating with people sometimes, and he's very robotic because he's like, I am a god. What is my purpose to deal with you people? I don't want to deal with you people. And then, of course, he meets Angela, and that kind of changes. But Yahya does an amazing job of changing your perspective on Dr. Manhattan. Because originally, I don't know if I was a huge Dr. Manhattan fan, but this show turned me around on him because of Yahya's performance. Because the way that he deals with any confrontation, the way that he thinks, and everything that he does is great. And we'll kind of... I might say that for the finale doc, but his performance is fantastic because it is not at all what I expected. I thought it was going to be a totally different actor to be Dr. Manhattan, but the fact that they made Yahya do it was awesome because I really liked what he did in Aquaman as Black Manta, and I'm glad I got to see him here, and I can't wait to see what he does in the future because I know he has another franchise coming up. I don't remember what it is, but he's in another big franchise. Jeremy Irons as Adrian Veidt or Ozymandias. I noticed this in the finale last night as it's wrapping up. Lindelof's writing and his other writers on this show did something I never thought was possible. I thought Adrian Veidt and Ozymandias was the most boring character in the first story, and to have him be the villain and do all this stuff in the original, I was like, okay, I guess. It was whatever. I mean, I didn't expect him to do it. I think that's what makes it the most shocking thing is like, oh, yeah, he did it. And how he's written in this show, I think that don't go crazy, internet, but I think Lindelof's interpretation of Adrian Veidt and Jeremy Irons' performance is better than previous iterations. I think this actually made me invested in Ozymandias. This made me invested in his storyline in a way that I wasn't really in the original work, and I really wasn't in the movie. And that's maybe that was intentional in Alan Moore's work, but this show made me like Adrian Veidt a little bit more. And then, of course, there were moments where I was pulled back in to be like, yeah, I don't really like this guy. But, for instance, all the stuff that he has to do with, and again, we're talking spoilers here. He's stuck on a moon on Jupiter with servants who they need him, they just worship him. And he writes a play, and it is the origin of Dr. Manhattan, and he literally burns one of these people alive. And you're like, oh my God, how could he burn someone? He really doesn't care about people. He's really psychotic. And then the same guy that was burned is carrying the charred body. I'm like, oh, so they're clones. And then it gets weirder and weirder and weirder when he's on Jupiter, and you're starting to question, how does this play into the story? Trust me, it all works out. That I feel like that's what Lindelof had to say to people when he was writing the scripts for this show. But eventually you find out that he's someone that is stuck on Jupiter because Dr. Manhattan went to the moon of one of the moons of Jupiter, created life, which is something he said at the end of the book, goes, creates life, realizes, this is kind of boring, leaves, comes back to Earth, goes to Vietnam where Angela Abar is, meets her there, says, hey, I want to be with you, I'm going to fall in love with you, blah, blah, blah. Runs into Adrian Veidt again, who explains to him, I had the whole trying to kill you was plan B, this was plan A. I can put this in your forehead and it'll reset your brain, you'll forget who you are and your abilities and make you think you're human and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, well, I get to see my utopia. And Dr. Manhattan's like, well, I'll give you one. I'll show you one. They need somebody it's already a bunch of people there. They just need somebody to worship. I'll send you there. And then Veidt goes there, and Veidt hates it. Because I've noticed every episode that you see him in, it's a year has passed. So every time you see him, it's a year later. And he lives on this planet by himself, and he gets bored with all these servants because they serve him, and that's the thing, they worship him too much. He claims he wants this god complex, or he has this god complex, and he wants to be loved and revered, and then when he is, he hates it. So that level of narcissism, and it makes more sense that he was the villain of the Alan Moore story. Now maybe I'm an idiot and I didn't catch it when I've read it 2 or 3 times, but I think the show really lets that come to the forefront and lets you understand, oh yeah, this guy really is this narcissistic jerk that would stage all this stuff to kill 3 million people. He would do that. It makes so much sense. So yeah, that's Adrian Veidt. I think he does a great job. And there's a scene in the finale, of course, when he fights the game warden, and the game warden shoots him. And I'm thinking, while he's laying on the ground, I'm like, please let him do it. Please let him do it. Please let him do it. And of course, he kicks over his hand, and Veidt caught the bullet. I was like, yes. I was so excited about that. It also, the thing happened in the first episode where you see Don Johnson's badge on the ground, and there's a shot focused on it, and I go, there's going to be blood that hits it. Let the blood hit it. And the blood splats right on it, just like the smiley face button. And I was like, yes! Yes! This is great. So, a lot to love about Adrian Veidt's character. And Jeremy Irons, again, shows why he's one of the best actors alive. He gives an amazing performance. And actually makes me, sort of like Adrian Veidt. But then by the end, I'm like, yeah, well, you still suck. Another highlight, the origin. Now, this is what I was talking about, where I didn't mind Lindelof kind of rewriting the history of Watchmen. But yes, the origin story of Hooded Justice is a really cool episode because it really is the entire episode. What happens is Angela Abar, she takes these pills called Nostalgia, which exist in the original book. They're referenced there. Essentially, they're pills that let you experience your memories and relive moments of your life, but when you take other people's, isn't that good. So Angela takes a bunch of her grandpa's pills, not knowing their nostalgia, and this whole entire episode we are dealing with his origin story. And again, it's extremely politically and racially charged, and I think it's important to have this episode exist. To start with the Tulsa race riot, and then about halfway through the season, you deal with more racism, and you deal with the stuff that her grandpa had to go through. And honestly, it really hits home. And if you are upset by this show, and if you are annoyed by the way that this is treated, you should be upset and annoyed for one reason, and one reason only. It is that this really happened to people in our country. That's the only reason you should be mad or annoyed with this show's portrayal of this stuff. That's the only way you can be mad about this, because it happens. I hate to say it, probably still exists in some places around this country, and it's not okay, and you should be pissed about that. But if you are pissed because the show is trying to be preachy about this stuff, you have to realize what you're getting mad about and what you're arguing for. Just accept that this stuff happened and understand that it happened, and just also keep in mind it's a TV show, and try to enjoy the frickin' TV show. I hate that so much in the world that we live in now. And look, I'm guilty of it. Everybody's guilty of it. That's just who we are as human beings. If we don't necessarily like something, we want to complain about it on the internet. That's just who we are as humans. That's just what we are. That's what I think the whole reason Twitter exists. But also keep in mind, you have to sit back and relax before you want to send out an angry tweet or send out an angry YouTube comment. Think about what is being said in the story that's being told. And what happens when we don't pay attention to this stuff. And I think Hooded Justice episode was brilliantly done, amazingly shot. Like the visual effects, the stunt work, everything about that episode. The fact that it's all in black and white, and then you have little flashes where it's Angela, but then it's her grandpa, and everything about that story was fantastic. They do address his homosexuality right away in the show, on the like show within a show that they were doing, but then they do it here, which I was kind of like, didn't totally forgot about this part of the character. It doesn't make me uncomfortable. I don't mind that stuff, but it was kind of like, oh, we're doing that, because the placement of this scene was a little weird, where he was just sitting there talking to his wife, and the next minute he's just plowing Captain Metropolis, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right. That's where we're going, okay. And then, we kind of get the story of why people thought that Hooded Justice was white, because, oh man, the first moment of him being Hooded Justice, holy cow, that was extremely impactful. The scene before that, where he arrested a guy who obviously committed arson against, I think it was a Jewish bakery, and he brought this guy in, clearly a racist, clearly an anti-Semite, and a horrible dude, and then a cop carries him off and does the Cyclops symbol, which is like the original, they're kind of the Ku Klux Klan before I think the Ku Klux Klan still exists in this world, but Cyclops created it, and any sort of racist group that shows up is from Cyclops. Cyclops is just like, let's just be the the KKK is a division of Cyclops, this racist group, and so is 7th Cavalry. Anyway, then the cop does this thing on his forehead, and you find out it's a circle on his forehead. Oh, he's a member of Cyclops. And you find out that the guy goes free, that Will Reeves arrested, and they find him, beat him up, and lynch him. But they don't kill him, they cut him down, and they say, next time we won't cut you down, kind of thing. And they put a hood over him. And it's a horrible scene. It's a graphic scene. But it also reminds you of the horrible things that we did to African Americans, and we cannot go down that path again. That's exactly what this show is trying to tell you, is history repeats itself. Great. Keep in mind, this is fiction, but this stuff really happened. It's almost like alternate history, historical fiction. Is what this whole thing is. And this stuff happens. And we need to just... we have to understand that it's not a pointing fingers. It's not... I mean, it is, because we should point the fingers of horrible racists like that. But it's also a story of, this is not who we should be. Unfortunately, this is the story. This is how we formed our country, and this is where we started. But this is not where we need to be. We need to be above that. And as human beings, we need to evolve and change and not hate each other. And show it. It's so much easier. And granted, I don't know if this is what the show was coming at, but this is what I interpreted of it. It's so much easier. And this is just my life perspective. It's so much easier to love than it is to hate. I feel like you have to be programmed to hate, where love is something that we all just normally have. And love is a big component to this story. Another thing that I loved about Hooded Justice is they did the Minutemen picture, similar to the comic book and the movie. So I love that. Shout out to Hollis Mason in there, and his brief reference. They handle the rape of the attempted rape of Silk Spectre a little bit better than the movie. Better than the movie. Not a little bit. I just think that it was shot too much like a stylized Snyder action scene than a horrible attempted rape, and I think the show interprets it better. And of course it has to be in there because Hooded Justice stopped it. I think the best episode of the season, another highlight of the show, is got to be Dr. Manhattan's episode. because it was beautifully told, and it really lets you get inside the mind of John Osterman, Dr. Manhattan, where the story itself is told out of sequence, because the whole crux of it is he is sitting at a bar in Vietnam, which, by the way, Vietnam in this story is the 51st state of the United States. He shows up to the bar in Vietnam, and I think it's like some sort of anniversary after Dr. Manhattan showed up and ended the war. And so there's like a bunch of Dr. Manhattan stuff around, masks and toys and all that. So he puts on a Manhattan mask and walks into the bar and meets Angela. And how he's recollecting his story to her, his past, which I love that they really don't go to origin, because it's like, if we're going to assume you read the book, here's his origin story and that. Let's do something a little bit different. Let's go a little bit further back in his storyline, but not too far back to where it's just completely just the scene in the book, which I've been reading through it again. I just read through it again, and it's one of my favorite parts of the book. And this is how I realized I identify more with Dr. Manhattan, and I like Dr. Manhattan more. It's because of Yaya's performance in this episode, and I love how they interpret how Dr. Manhattan perceives time, because it's referenced in the book that he perceives time differently than us human beings, and they do it in his like little origin story with the book, and it does it here where it's like it's 2019. I'm sitting in front of my laptop doing a podcast, but it's also 2012, and I'm graduating high school, and I'm getting a diploma, and like it. Past, present, future, he's experiencing it all at once. And the whole entire episode is told that way, where we're constantly shifting back and forward and present and back and forward and present. And it's really cool. And it's almost identical to I don't want to say identical. It's in the spirit of the scene in the book where he gives his backstory and we can learn more about him. And I think it's done incredibly well in this. And I really enjoyed it a lot. And it was I would say it's my favorite episode of the whole season. I just love the execution of it. And then it made me realize, like, oh, man, Dr. Manhattan's probably my favorite character in this whole story. Both Alan Moore's work and this show. Lastly, of the highlights, the Looking Glass episode I really liked. I love the fact that they did an episode of a character that experienced the squid drop. And what they did to him. It gave him PTSD. It gave him and other people PTSD of these like extra dimensional monsters and all that. And it was a cool idea, and I like it a lot. And it actually added some emotional weight to, let's be honest, a kind of silly story of just a giant squid flopping into New York. I'm just saying, it's nice. All right, now the moment you've been waiting for. Let's talk about that season finale, because wow, what a finale that was. So it opens up in the base in Antarctica. Goodness, I can't talk now. Where Veidt sets up his message to tell President Robert Redford, like, hey, I know you're president because I planned it and I helped you. Oh, by the way, I'm the guy that killed 3 million people to save us from a nuclear war and blah, blah, blah. During that time, a cleaning lady sneaks into his office, and we find out that Adrian Veidt has frozen some of his semen. So she takes a vial and empties it, fills it with hand lotion, puts it back in, and then takes the vial and artificially inseminates herself. And because I thought originally that it was going to be true, it was a new character who is responsible for leaps in technology and human genetics, and she can make clones and all this other stuff. I thought it was her, but no. And then I looked closer and I was like, no, that's not her. It was her mom. And oh, look at that surprise! Veidt has a child. That was the first twist in the episode. I knew that somehow True would be connected to Adrian Veidt, but I did not expect it to be, oh, she's his bastard child. And I just thought that was interesting. And it was really cool, and it was a nice reveal, and it was really funny because I didn't even think about this, but Veidt was saying it wasn't possible that he had a daughter because he was saying that he never laid with a woman, and he was like Alexander the Great and all this stuff. And then she's like, "Oh, you mean this picture that has all your semen in it, like behind this? This is Alexander the Great." And he's like, "Oh crap, she really is my kid." But it was a great moment because then you see when you think about all the things that had happened with True before this reveal in this season, you're like, that makes sense. She seems like a Veidt. She seems like Adrian's daughter. You gotta take another sip of water. And then we find out that through that storytelling, through the little like back and forth, and that's what I always liked about this show, this series. Let's just call it the series at this point, not just the show, but the book. Let's just call it Watchmen. The franchise that shouldn't be a franchise, but actually is working out to be cool. Hey, look, by the way, the Ghostbusters trailer, I said I didn't like the trailer, and Ghostbusters shouldn't be a franchise, but that movie would probably be good. Case in point, Watchmen, the TV show, shouldn't exist, but it's awesome and it's great, and I'm glad it exists. So, just saying, internet. I got some tweets. So yeah, Veidt finds out that she knows that Dr. Manhattan's on Jupiter, and because he created life, he gives off a particular bit of radiation, particular blip, and she's like, I'm going to build a thing to get him. I'm going to send out a satellite, bring him here, and then kill him and take his powers and become Dr. Manhattan myself. And she's like, I want I think she said 42 billion, some crazy number. And she's like, why? Because I'm your daughter. And he says, I'll never call you daughter. But we flash forward to now, knowing what we know. Adrian Veidt's been living on Jupiter, not Dr. Manhattan. And he's like, no, I want off this rock. So he shoots himself into space where the satellite will take a picture, and it says, save me, daughter, which is important because he says he'd never call her daughter. And that means he's depressed. So he gets picked up and brought back to Earth. So now Veidt's on Earth with everybody else. Which I thought when that happened, I was like, I think with this whole thing that it's actually going to happen, and the Millennium Clock strikes midnight instead of the Doomsday Clock, it's the Millennium Clock. And seeing the like floating orb thing that she has, he knows she's going to do it. And he even says the end is nigh. I think in that moment, I think I knew that Adrian was actually going to stop her because he's pissed that he didn't think of this. I really do. It has to be, and I think they really show that off in the show where it's like, I don't think Adrian cares about her trying to save humanity or being a hero. He's mostly pissed that he didn't think of it and it wasn't his idea. And maybe because he still loves John as a friend and he doesn't want his friend to die. Even though his friend clearly is dead. Anyway, oh no, I jumped ahead. The Dr. Manhattan scene I thought was really beautiful, and I really loved it a lot. Because Senator Keene, which, hey, Keene Act, I see the reference. Senator Keene, we find out he's a racist and he's with Cyclops. Makes sense. He says, I'm going to turn myself into Dr. Manhattan. I'm going to kill him and take his powers. Essentially what True wants to do, but he's going to do it. So he steps in a chamber and he does it, and then she opens the chamber and he's just goop. Which, gross. It was really funny that he was just goop. And because of that, blood creeping into Dr. Manhattan's cell, Dr. Manhattan was able to reach back out to the cell. Because the cell that he's in, obviously, like we know at this point if they captured him, it like somehow nerfs his powers. So he's just sitting there and he's like, oh, there's some blood that seeped into the bottom of my cell. I'll just hit this and teleport people. So he does that and teleports Veidt and Silk Spectre, Lori, and we find out Looking Glass was infiltrating. Because at one point at the end of Looking Glass's episode, we thought he was going to die, but no, he killed all those guys. And he broke into their compound dressed up as one of them. So Dr. Manhattan teleports him back to Antarctica so Veidt can send in. We find out earlier in the season that he had been dropping squids. He faked the whole interdimensional thing, and he'd also been dropping squids to keep up that story. And he created an algorithm to do it, so now he's doing it as as a way to save the people. So instead of like letting them dissolve when they hit the atmosphere, he freezes them so they hit like bullets, and that's how he stops True from becoming Dr. Manhattan. But while that's happening, we see the end of Dr. Manhattan, and I thought it was beautiful because it was that moment of what we'd seen from the previous episode and what we had known of him as a character. Angela asks him what's going on. He's getting like his essence is getting sucked into this machine and he's dying. She's like, "What are you experiencing?" And he's like, "Every moment." Well, before that, when he teleports him, she's like, "When you teleport me away?" And he's like, "I didn't want to die alone." I'm like, "Damn, this show. Damn. Hit me in the feels." And then she says, "You know, what are you experiencing? What are you seeing?" And he says, "Every moment we've had together all at once." Essentially saying, my life's flashing before my eyes. I'm about to die. And like how they did that in their story, and it goes back to the performance of Yaya and the performance of Regina King. It was so believable, but that those two were in love and those two cared about each other. And it was amazing to see that final moments. And I'm actually okay with it. I'm glad they got rid of Manhattan because Manhattan was always the worst, not the worst character, but he was the worst thing to Watchmen, because if there was ever a bad situation, you could just have him show up and stop it, because he's a god. And to have that god finally go away kind of makes it, if there is a future to this show, if there's more episodes, it adds interesting aspects. So now that not everybody's trying to be Dr. Manhattan. Towards the end, Angela goes to the movie theater and finds her grandpa. They have a chat, and he says, "You got to break a few. To make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs." She's like, "What the hell does that mean?" He said you'd understand. She's like, "Well, I don't get it." And he's like, "Well, you're not ready yet." They go home. She checks out a carton of eggs. And then, of course, if you remember from the episode when she met Dr. Manhattan, he says, theoretically, I could put all my powers in this egg. She's like, if you could put all your powers in this egg and I eat it, I would get your powers. He's like, theoretically, probably it could happen. So if I eat this, you could walk on water. And he's like, yeah, essentially. So she takes that egg that was in the carton that she smashed in the previous episode, but there's still the one egg left. She breaks it open, eats it raw, which is gross, man. Cook it up. Have yourself some scrambled eggs, right? And then she goes out to the pool that she has to see if she can walk on water. And then it cuts. And that's it. That's the end of the season. I thought it was brilliant. I thought, again, I had my doubts. There were moments when I just like, what are we doing here? I don't know if this is the right move. I don't know this, that, or the other thing. But by the end of it, everything worked out for me. Yes, there's still some questions, but I loved every bit of it. So I think it holds up incredibly well next to Alan Moore's work. And I think if you hate Snyder's movie, this is a good alternative to it, and this is a good story. I don't know. I really don't know the future of it. I don't know what HBO's plans are, but I think it was a perfect story and a perfect season of television. And yes, I had some moments where I was like, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. But, because nothing's ever 100% perfect. That's just silly. But I think they really knocked it out of the park. In terms of future of the show, I got to ask, should we get a season 2? I don't know. I really don't know if there should be a season 2. It's hard to say because as a fan of it, as someone who really enjoyed it, and as someone who really loves just Watchmen, I would like to see a season 2, but at the same time, I think it works perfectly as one season. I think it wraps up everything it needs to perfectly in one thing. And Lindelof himself said, I'm open to making more of this if HBO wants it to be, but it is set up as one season, and that's how it works. So I think it works to find the way it is. I wonder if they're going to make like a comic book adaptation of this. So if there's people out there that want to have the hard copy of Watchmen and its sequel, I wonder if that's going to be a thing. I probably buy this on Blu-ray. I honestly will, because I know, I mean, I have HBO, but I don't know. It's just something I want on my shelf. It's just something and which is so funny because most of the time I'm all about digital media, but there's a few cases where I really want physical media, and I don't know. I'll probably buy this when it comes out on Blu-ray and stick it on my shelf next to the director's cut of Snyder's movie, and then have it next to the graphic novel itself. That's the perfect scenario for me right there. So what did you... I know this is a really long episode. This is just like the Joker spoiler review where I rambled on for an hour about a movie that I had watched and something I just want to talk about. I feel the same way here. I wanted to talk about this. I was going to do it episode by episode, but I was like, no, I'll just wait to the end of the season and kind of just talk about all the things that I loved about it. So what did you guys think of season 1 of Watchmen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think that there was just missing something? I want to know. I also want to know, do you think there should be a season 2 of Watchmen? Let me know on the social medias at Loud Opinionated on Twitter, Loud and Opinionated on Facebook, at Lumberjack5150 on Twitter and Instagram. Let me know. I want to know. And also, just comment on this YouTube video. Loud and Opinionated is where this will be. So let me know if A, you liked it, or B, you hated it, or C, you'd like to see a season 2 of Watchmen. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. And whether it's watching the show Watchmen or reading the book, be loud and be proud. That was garbage. Be loud and be proud.